Hello and thank you for watching. In the last video we discussed the basics of genetics and inheritance in the breeding of fancy mice. In this video we will make a start on some of the genetic variability that is in mice and what that variability can mean when we are trying to selectively breed them. We discussed last time how genes that are found in the same place on a chromosome are described as being on the same locus. In mice, the genes that control coat colour can be found in multiple locus, and that's because there are multiple genes, and indeed multiple alleles of those genes, that can interact to form the colour variant that we see as the mouse's phenotype. So the locus that we need to think about are A, B, C, D and P for colour variations in mice. The A locus is referred to as something called the Agouti locus, and it's the base gene for which all further dilution genes act upon. The B locus, which is the brown dilution. The C locus, which is involved in white dilution and albinism. The D locus, which is blue dilution. And finally the P locus, which is Pinkeye. So the first locus for us to consider is going to be the A locus, and the A locus actually has a large number of possible alleles. The main alleles, however, that we're going to look at first are going to be the dominant A and the recessive A. So if a mouse has two dominant A alleles, or a dominant and one recessive A allele, then they are going to be agouti coloured, and that is the wild type mouse. If on the A locus, however, we have two versions of the recessive allele, this is going to give us a non-agouti base, and that's also known as a black mouse or a black base. Now the way these locus work is that each one will begin to either affect or not affect the base coloration. So if you have a agouti, dominant A, and you also have a dominant B, you would still have an agouti mouse. If, however, that dominant A then inherits recessive Bs, that agouti mouse would become a cinnamon. In your recessive branch, if you have the recessive A's and a dominant B, it would remain a black mouse. If you have recessive A's with recessive B's, because of that brown dilation, it would become a chocolate. The C locus acts slightly differently. In the same way that there are many different alleles on the A locus, not just dominant and recessive, there are many linked recessives alleles that are possible on the C locus. For this reason, for now, we're just going to assume that all the mice can only inherit dominant C basing. If we then move on to our next locus, that's going to be our D gene, and this is for the blue dilution. If our dominant agouti, so dominant A, dominant B, dominant C, receives a dominant D, it remains an agouti mouse. If, however, it receives two of the recessive D, then it would become a blue agouti. If our dominant A recessive B cinnamon mouse receives a dominant D's, then that would remain cinnamon. If it receives two recessive D's, it would become a lilac agouti. On our non-agouti branch, our recessive branch, if that black mouse received a dominant D, then it would remain black. If it inherits that recessive D's, that it would become blue. If our recessive A, recessive B chocolate mouse receives a dominant D, it remains chocolate. However, if it receives a recessive D, then that chocolate would become lilac. Now, the next gene that can begin to influence it is going to be on the P locus, and that is going to be for our Pinkeye. Wild type mice, our agouti mice, are going to have black eyes, so dominant P, and so that would remain agouti. However, if our agouti mouse has pink eyes, so two recessive P's, then we call it an Argentine. If our blue agouti receives a dominant P, then it would remain a blue agouti. However, if it receives pink eyes, 2 recessive Ps, it would become a blue Argentine. The cinnamon, again, if it receives dominant P, it remains cinnamon. However, if it receives the recessive pink eyes, it becomes apricot. If our lilac agouti receives dominant P, it would remain a lilac agouti. However, if it receives recessive Ps, it would become a lavender agouti. Our recessive non-agouti line, if that black mouse, so recessive A's but dominant B, C and D, receives a dominant P, it remains a black mouse. However, if that recessive A but dominant B, C, D receives 2 recessive Ps, it becomes a dove. If our recessive A, dominant B, dominant C, recessive D, so our blue mouse, receives a dominant P, it remains a blue mouse. However, if it inherits the recessive Ps, it's going to become silver. Our chocolate would remain a chocolate unless it receives those Ps, in which case we call it champagne. And our lilac would remain lilac unless it receives those pink eyes, in which case it would become lavender. The next thing that we need to be thinking about is our C-locus. If our C-locus has 2 simple recessive Cs, the mouse will become albino. Recessive C removes any dilution effect of our P, D and B locus, and it also removes any influence of the base locus. If on the C locus we have recessive C bracket H, recessive C bracket H, they're known as Siamese. If we have C bracket H, C bracket CH, they're known as Burmese. If we have C bracket H, C bracket E, this is colour point. And if we have C bracket CH, C bracket CH, they're either known as Havanas if it's on our recessive non-agouti line, or as silver agouti if it's on our dominant agouti line. If we have C bracket E, C bracket E, you'd be looking at a reverse Siamese, and that would be the same for both lines. If you have C bracket CH, C bracket E, or C bracket CH, C, then that would be known as either a mock chocolate for our non-agouti line or chinchilla for our agouti line. The final option would be C bracket E, C, and that's going to be known as either a bone or an agouti bone, depending on that lineage. I do plan to do another video where we'll consider the different A bases, and I can answer any questions that this raises for anyone. A quick look at our phenotype and genotype quiz. We'll start with the black mouse. So because it's black, we know that it's going to be non-agouti based, and then because it has that black colour, we know all other alleles are going to be dominant. We only know that it's going to be carrying 1 copy of those dominant on the other loci, so it could well be carrier for something more interesting. The second mouse is grey. That's going to be either something like a dove or a silver, so we know that it's going to be non-agouti based again. There's no way to tell sort of conclusively between a dove and a silver. The only way to do that would be to breed him with a female of known genetics. Now our C-locus mice are going to be a little bit more tricky. So the mouse here has no pigmentation throughout any of its body, so it's likely to be an albino. If it had any other kind of pigmentation, like any creaming on the white or any pigmentation around the nose or on the toes, perhaps it could be carrying something else. And the coloration of this mouse suggests that it's going to be a Himalayan, not a Siamese. The Siamese tend to be a little bit darker, more sort of cream background, where the Himalayans are much more of a white background, with the same sort of colour points, but like I say, it's that white that will tell you which one's which. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments if you guessed right on that quiz, and hopefully I will see you for the next part. Thank you for watching.